New updates from Pack? Well, are you linking me? Are you linking me the tweet that I'm watching right now? Oh no. We're going down the rabbit hole. This is the worst format I've ever played. Okay. We've got an update. We've got an update on Pack. Pack is spiraling down the we've all been there. We've all been there, chat. We've all been there, man. It happens. Steven Games, thank you for the 3 months. And Soferman, thank you for the 4. I will say, I think he has a point. I don't think it's the worst format he's ever played. This is definitely not the worst format ever. No shot. Not even close. Not even remotely close to the worst format ever. But I will say, I think the format right now is relatively overwhelming in terms of what decks are viable. And I think it feels a little bit like rock, paper, scissors in a way, where like rock, paper, scissors on a larger scale. Like rock, paper, scissors with like 10 options, you know? There's a lot of different decks. All of them are pretty viable. You know, it's like Unchained is viable, Tier is viable, Pearly is viable, Rescue Ace is viable. There's a bunch more like that decks that are definitely viable decks, right? Decks that you have to account for in deck building. Don't say Exodia is viable, Chad. That don't please. Every time I do this, everyone keeps saying exactly what I just told you not to say. Anyways, a lot of viable decks right now means that preparing for a YCS can be very hard, very overwhelming, and sometimes even impossible in the sense that it is not possible to cover every possible matchup with the limited amount of, you know, choices you get to make. Like, you're naturally in an environment of so many different decks, right? There is no deck that has a great matchup against all of them or the majority of the format. That cannot exist, because if that did exist, we wouldn't have such a diverse format. If there was one deck that beats a significant portion of all the other decks, we wouldn't be calling it a diverse format, right? We would be referring to it as, okay, this is clearly the best deck, and then most people are going to play that deck, and then it's going to evolve into a not so diverse format, you know? So by default, if a lot of diversity exists, you don't have a deck that is a clear solution to the format. And let me be clear here. People in chat are saying, you know, diversity is good and so on and so forth. Diversity is good in some aspects, right? Diversity is, for example, very cool for watching tournaments. It's cool to not have the same decks over and over and over again pop up on the screen. It's very exciting. It's very cool. Especially like maybe for people that want to go to an event and have you don't want to play against the same deck over and over and over again, maybe, right? But from a very high competitive standpoint, it's not cool to spend a lot of effort, spend a lot of time preparing for an event, and then you have to pick a deck, you have to make a decision, and you're like, okay, I'm picking this deck. It's got some good matchups, it's got some bad matchups. There's nothing really I can do about it, right? There's no other better option. There's no clear option that beats a lot of decks. There's nothing I can do. I have to pick a deck. I have to accept that some matchups are going to be easier, some matchups are going to be harder, right? You have to make concessions in deck building in formats like that. Like deck choice and deck building, you have to make concessions. You're like, I think it's more important to prepare for these decks than it is to prepare for other decks, right? And then you go to an event, and if you're unlucky, then you just don't face what you were expecting or whatever. And sometimes that's an issue of you didn't prepare well enough, but you know, it's often an issue of you just like it's hard to handle such a diverse format. And I will say, I think it's completely reasonable to enjoy diverse formats. There's nothing wrong with it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with just enjoying diverse formats. Completely reasonable to have that opinion. I personally am more on Pack's side here. My personal opinion is that at a certain threshold, when there's too many decks, it becomes relatively frustrating. Especially if the decks work very, very different, right? If there's a bunch of decks and they all work like in similar ways, maybe it's like if the same cards are good against most decks, then maybe it's okay to build a deck, that's fine. But if it's like a bunch of super different decks, where like, imagine like you have a bunch of decks where hand traps are very bad against them, then you have a bunch of decks where hand traps are absolutely necessary against them, and it's like, what are you going to pick? Whatever you pick is going to come back biting you, right? Because like, if against half of the decks you want hand traps in your deck, and against the other half of the decks you don't want hand traps in your deck, no matter what you do, you're gonna be it's gonna be frustrating, right? Because you either play against combo heavy decks and then they just combo on you and you don't put hand traps in your deck, or you draw all your hand traps against matchups where they don't do shit, right? And so I just think it's important to realize the pros and cons of these kind of situations, right? In the sense that it's completely fine to like diversity in a Yu-Gi-Oh format, but it's also like reasonable to not like it when you're preparing for an event. It's completely, there are reasonable arguments against having freaking 15 viable decks, even though it might look cool and balanced, right? And it is balanced overall, because there's no deck that has like an extraordinary high win rate, because otherwise we wouldn't have 15 viable decks. So the balancing is fine, right? But balancing in terms of deck choices doesn't necessarily have anything to do with you want the better player to win, right? If everything is balanced, that doesn't automatically make it so that the better player wins, right? Because even though decks are overall balanced, you might still have matchups that are like this or that, right? Only because a deck has an overall whatever 50% win rate, that can still be like, okay, that's you can still have a 50% win rate by having an 80% matchup against half of the format and then a 20% win rate against the other half of the format. That's overall 50%. But it doesn't really feel that, like, it doesn't feel balanced in practice. Because you're going to have like, okay, 80% matchup, you just stomp him. 20% matchup, you feel like you have no chance. That's not, it doesn't, the experience is not always what it looks like from the outside, right? And I think that's what you need to realize when you're looking, when you're saying like, oh, diverse format means balanced format. That does not always reflect the experience that you actually have when you go to an event. Because it doesn't feel good to play a matchup that's 20% or whatever, and it doesn't feel, it also doesn't feel that great. I mean, I guess it's fine to play an 80% matchup, but it's not like, you don't have to work for it, right? Like, you're playing Unchained into Labyrinth. It doesn't really feel like you're even doing anything. It's like you're just winning because your deck just carries that matchup. Pack lost this YCS is not too diversity in the format, but bad luck with the kitty and a high roll on Dragon Link. Yeah, it's just, I think those kind of things are culminating in frustration, right? It's like when you already don't enjoy the format, you don't have a great time preparing to the YCS, and then like... and then you go to the event and then you get high rolled by like Vanquish Soul and Dragon Link. But it's just like, on the other hand, that's the thing, right? If someone like Pac goes to a YCS, right? Even if he gets unlucky against a deck that is very popular, he probably has the means to prepare for that in deck building. However, I don't think for this particular format it's reasonable to have like answers to Vanquish Soul in your deck, right? Because you look at the pie chart of decks, Vanquish Soul is like, I don't know, the 20th most played deck or something, right? It's not reasonable to come prepared for Vanquish Soul to an event, but it can still happen. You can still play against it, get unlucky against it, and lose. And the thing is, he probably didn't do anything wrong, right? He didn't do anything wrong. He should not have respected Vanquish Soul in his deck building. But he still lost to it. And it was completely out of his control. And I think that's what's frustrating, right? That's what's frustrating to people at a high caliber, is when they go to an event, they do the best that they can do, and we know for a fact that Pac is a very good player, right? Pac is a very good player that has the ability to do really well at these events. And he goes to this event, he knows he's good enough to top, but he doesn't get there because of things that are completely out of his control, and I think that can be frustrating. right? I think that is what's frustrating. So I want to say I don't think this is the worst format ever. I don't think it's the worst format ever, and you are completely reasonable to like the current format. And I think that's what we can all agree on, is that everyone is different. Everyone likes different things about this card game, and some people will enjoy this format and some people will not enjoy this format. But I think it's always important to recognize the perspective that the other person is coming from, is what I tried to make clear. Maybe we're just over-interpreting a post that is just, Madge, I lost, so I hate this format now. But I will say, Pack has been voicing these concerns like weeks before the YCS as well. I know for a fact that there was a tweet where he said he might not even go to the YCS because he doesn't like it. Or no, it was a YouTube video that I watched. It was a YouTube video he made where he said he does not enjoy the format right now. He might not go to the YCS, which was always going to be cap. That was always going to be cap. When he said, I'm not going to go to this YCS because I don't like the format, that was cap. Because us as competitive human beings, as competitive Yu-Gi-Oh players, we don't have that choice. Even though we hate a format, we will not skip a YCS. That's like around the corner or like in our country or whatever. You know, we're still going. You know. So is this the worst format ever? Nope. Nope, it's not. Absolutely not. It's probably not even the worst format that Pack has ever played, because Pack started playing in 2019. I'm sure there's been worse formats since 2019. I'm looking at like Emancipator or shit like that, you know, Hulk, Link Cross and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure there were worse formats since Pack has started playing. I'm sure. But it's kind of like, I will say some of the formats that I personally, throughout my history in this game, some of the formats that I did not like were some of the more like super diverse ones. Like, for example, at the time, I did not enjoy Hat format. And I also did not enjoy last year's national format, the one where it was all adventure decks, Sword Soul, branded, all that, right? I did not enjoy that format either. So it tends to be the case. I think an observation to make is definitely a lot of the high caliber players are not liking these super diverse formats, and I think it's just as simple as it's hard to prepare for. Like if it's a tier 0 format, at least I know what to expect, and I can try to make and I can prepare for it. And then basically, if I go to the YCS, I'm sitting down, I know what to expect, I'm preparing for exactly that, and then we see how it goes, right? Even though some of the tier 0 formats have also been awful. I can see how these types of formats are bothersome to professional players, but I feel like these types of formats are fantastic for the wider audience. I personally love when there's a wide variety of decks that are meta contenders. It means you can more or less play your favorite deck instead of being forced into playing the most optimal deck. Yeah, no, I get that. That's why I've been saying it's reasonable to like them as well. It's completely reasonable to like them, but it's also reasonable to dislike them. I think that's at the end of the story. It's just like, you know, have your opinion, but respect the other opinions as well. Or like, you know, if Pack is molding about the format, let him mold. Let him, you know, understandable. I think it's that's the only thing, right? Just understand it, right? Understand that other people have other ways of looking at the game, and then it's all Gucci, right? Then the community understands each other, and it's fine. Like, someone else having a different opinion than you does not invalidate your opinion. I feel like a lot of people are always attacked by, when they have an opinion and someone else has a different opinion, they feel obligated to change the other person's opinion, which is not the best practice always, you know?